He said he was a widowed doctor, an oncologist at Johns Hopkins, temporarily on a Doctors Without Borders mission in Yemen. His name was Mark, and his words were the most beautiful, intricate lies I had ever seen. For 3 months, I had fallen for him, sending him thousands of dollars to help with medical supply emergencies. His camera was always broken, so we could never video chat. Last night, he sent me a new photo, a picture of him looking thoughtful in his field office. But he made one tiny arrogant mistake. He didn't realize I was a retired art history professor, a woman who had spent 40 years analyzing images for a living. He didn't see the electrical outlet in the background of the photo. The outlet was not from Yemen. It was a standard, 3-pronged American-style outlet. And that one simple detail was about to unravel his entire, fraudulent world. This is the story of a man who created a perfect illusion, and a woman whose trained eye for detail was about to expose the ugly truth. If you believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words, subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because you are about to see what happens when a simple image search becomes a weapon of mass destruction. Part 1. The lie was beautiful. It was a work of art, really. A masterpiece of deception. Dr. Mark Richardson, oncologist, widower, humanitarian. His first message had appeared on a classical music forum I frequented, a place of quiet, intellectual refuge since my husband, Robert, had passed. His message wasn't a clumsy flirtation. It was an intelligent comment on a recording of Bach's cello suites. We had started a conversation, a slow, elegant courtship conducted entirely through the written word. He was in Yemen, he explained, on a grueling 6-month mission with Doctors Without Borders. The work was brutal, but meaningful. He was a man of profound substance, a healer. He was in every way the perfect antidote to the shallow, image-obsessed dating world of Los Angeles that I, a 58-year-old widow, had no desire to navigate. The silence in my Santa Monica condo, a silence that had once been peaceful and was now just empty, became a little less cavernous. His emails, long and beautifully written, became the scaffolding of my days. He wrote of the challenges of his work, the resilience of the human spirit, his grief for his late wife, who had also been a doctor. He was a brilliant storyteller, and his story was everything I wanted to hear. I, a retired art history professor, was a connoisseur of stories. I had spent my life teaching students how to read the narratives hidden in paintings, how to understand the context and the subtext. And I had completely and utterly failed to read the subtext of my own life. The requests for money when they began were framed not as pleas, but as shared emergencies. They were always for the clinic. The first time, it was $5,000 for a batch of expired antibiotics that needed to be replaced immediately. He was so ashamed, so professionally humiliated. His own funds were tied up in international banking red tape. I, a woman who had spent her life on museum boards and charity committees, understood the logistics of philanthropy. It felt right. It felt like I was a part of his mission. I sent the money. A month later, it was $15,000 for a portable generator, after theirs had failed. Each transaction was a lifeline, a tangible connection to the good, honorable man who was doing God's work a world away. He promised he was coming home in a month. He just had one last financial hurdle, a final logistical fee, to ship his personal effects. It was another $10,000. He had sent me a new photo of himself, a picture to remind you of who you're waiting for, he'd written. It showed him in his field office, looking tired but noble, a look of thoughtful determination on his handsome face. It was in that photo that he made his fatal mistake. I was looking at it for the 10th time, my heart aching with a mixture of love and loneliness, when my old professorial brain, the part of me that had been dormant for months, suddenly flickered to life. My eyes drifted from his face to the background, the out-of-focus wall behind him. And there it was. Small, innocuous, and completely, utterly wrong. An electrical outlet. A standard, Type B, 3-pronged American outlet. The kind you would find in any home in California. The kind you would absolutely not find in Yemen, which uses the British Type G standard. The detail was so small, so mundane, yet so profoundly, catastrophically incorrect. It was a brushstroke from the wrong century, a pigment that hadn't been invented yet. It was the tell. The beautiful, perfect painting of Dr. Mark Richardson was a fake. And I, the expert authenticator, had just discovered the proof. Part 2. My entire life has been a study in the art of looking. Not just seeing, but looking. As a professor at Berkeley, I didn't just teach my students the names of artists and the dates of movements. I taught them how to deconstruct an image, how to analyze composition, how to understand the language of light and shadow, how to spot the anachronisms and the forger's tells. I taught them that every detail, no matter how small, tells a story. The electrical outlet was a story. It was a story of a lazy, arrogant forger who had assumed his audience was a fool. This was my hidden power, a lifetime of disciplined forensic observation. The romantic, grieving part of my heart had been the victim, but the cold, analytical mind of the art historian was now the investigator. My antagonist, this phantom Dr. Mark Richardson, was a master of narrative, but a sloppy visual artist. He had built a persona that was intellectually and emotionally irresistible to a woman like me. The widowed doctor trope is a classic for a reason. It combines intelligence, compassion, and a shared sense of loss. The Doctors Without Borders angle was a masterstroke, adding a layer of unimpeachable nobility and providing the perfect, built-in excuse for his isolation and his constant need for emergency funds. He was a brilliant scriptwriter, but he had gotten lazy with his set design. He had assumed that a lonely 58-year-old woman wouldn't notice a detail, like an electrical outlet. He had no idea he was dealing with a woman who had once identified a counterfeit Vermeer by the incorrect depiction of a single bread roll in the background. My son Liam was my only family. He was a documentary filmmaker, a profession that had, in its own way, taught him to be a student of human nature, a seeker of truth. He lived in a chaotic but creative apartment in Venice Beach, a world away from my quiet, academic life. We were close, but I had hidden my relationship with Mark from him. It was my secret, my private happiness. The thought of admitting my folly to him, of seeing the look of pity in his kind, observant eyes, was a shame I could not bear. He was the one person who could help me, the one person I trusted implicitly, but he was also the person whose judgment I feared the most. The wall of my own pride was the first thing I would have to overcome. Part 3. The night I discovered the outlet, I did not sleep. I sat at my computer, the single, damning photograph open on my screen, and I felt the grief and the love for Mark curdle into something else. It was the cold, thrilling, and deeply familiar sensation of a research problem. The conflict was no longer an emotional one, it was an academic one. My hypothesis: Dr. Mark Richardson is a fraudulent construct. Now I needed to prove it. My smart plan began with the one tool I had at my disposal: the image. The obstacle was that a simple reverse image search, as I had tried before, had yielded nothing. His photos were not common stock images. They were unique. But were they? An image search engine looks for exact matches. But a human brain, a trained art historian's brain, looks for stylistic similarities. I began to think of his photos not as personal snapshots, but as a body of work. Were there commonalities in the lighting, the composition, the model's expression? I spent hours creating a digital file, a catalog raisonné of his deception, collecting every photo he had ever sent me. I noticed a pattern. The lighting was always soft, professional. The backgrounds were always slightly out of focus. The doctor's expression was always one of gentle, thoughtful melancholy. This wasn't a collection of random selfies. It was a professional photo shoot. But who was the model? I started a new, more creative line of inquiry. I stopped searching for the image itself and started searching for its components. I ran searches for distinguished older male model, doctor photo shoot, medical stock photography. For a full day, I waded through a sea of cheesy, generic images. And then I found him. It was on a small, obscure German stock photography website. The model's name was Klaus. He was a 62-year-old retired literature professor from Hamburg, who did some modeling on the side. And there he was in 100 different poses. Klaus in a lab coat. Klaus with a stethoscope. Klaus looking thoughtfully out a window. And there on page 4 of his portfolio was the exact photo, the one of him in his field office. My heart was pounding. I had him. I had the source. The beautiful, compassionate face of Dr. Mark Richardson belonged to a German literature professor named Klaus. Part 4. The ticking clock was the $10,000 he was still expecting. He had started to send messages, a slight edge of impatience creeping into his romantic prose. "My love, any news from the bank? The officials are getting restless." I had to keep him on the line while I continued my investigation. This required a new, difficult performance. I became a master of feigned incompetence, the very thing he had assumed I was. I wrote back, "Oh darling, the bank is being so difficult. They have put a hold on my account because of the unusual activity. It's so frustrating. I am trying to clear it up." The subplot that became my lifeline was my son. I finally broke down and called Liam. I told him everything. The shame was immense, but the relief was greater. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't pity me. He listened, and when I was done, his voice was quiet and firm. "Okay, Mom," he said. "He picked the wrong family. Let's get him." The complexity of our new alliance was that Liam's skills as a filmmaker, his ability to find people, to get them to talk, to piece together a story from scattered fragments, were now being repurposed for a very different kind of documentary. He became my producer, my director, my strategic partner. "You've got the what, Mom?" he said after I showed him my research on the stock photos. "Now we need to find the who. Who is the person who bought these photos? Who is the person typing the emails?" Our investigation moved to the next level. Liam used his own research skills to start digging into the digital infrastructure of the scam. He focused on the nonprofit, Global Children's Health Initiative, the fake charity Mark claimed to work for. It had a website, a slick, professional-looking site full of inspiring stories and a donate button. Liam started to deconstruct it. It was a brilliant forgery, a clone of a real charity's website, but with one crucial difference: the donation portal. Liam, using a series of techniques I didn't understand, began to trace the digital path of that portal. It was a journey into the dark heart of the internet, a trail that led through a maze of shell corporations and anonymous servers. And at the end of that trail, we were about to find the real artist behind this masterpiece of deception. End of Part 1. Part 2, containing sections 5 to 12 and the marketing elements, will be delivered next. Excellent. Here is the second and final part of the story. I have focused on expanding each section to meet the word count, delving deeper into the investigation, the emotional journey of the protagonist, and the final, satisfying confrontation, all while maintaining the immersive, audio-focused narrative style. Part 5. For a week, Liam worked in a state of quiet, obsessive focus. My condo was transformed into a production office, the dining table covered with laptops and whiteboards. He would work late into the night, murmuring to himself in a language of code and network protocols that I didn't understand. I became his research assistant, feeding him the information I had, the names, the dates, the emotional beats of my relationship with Mark. I felt a strange sense of purpose, a feeling that had been absent for months. I was a part of a team again. The turning point came on a Tuesday night. I had just dozed off on the couch when Liam gently shook me awake. His eyes, usually so full of a restless, creative energy, were wide with a kind of horrified awe. "Mom," he whispered, "you are not going to believe this." He turned his laptop towards me. On the screen was a map of the United States, with a blinking dot over a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. "I found him," Liam said, his voice a low, angry hum. "I traced the payment processor for the fake charity website. It's a shell, but it's sloppy. It leads back to a residential IP address." He pointed to the blinking dot. "That's him. That's the real computer where the emails are coming from." But that wasn't the turning point. The turning point was the information in the window next to the map. Liam had run the address through a series of public records databases. "His name is Scott Peterson," Liam said, his voice dropping even lower. "He's 45 years old. He's an ex-programmer who was fired for embezzlement a few years ago." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And Mom, he doesn't work alone. The house, it's registered in his wife's name. Her name is Jennifer Peterson. And Jennifer Peterson, she's the founder and CEO of the Silver Linings dating app. The app where you met Mark." The room went silent. The air felt thick, heavy, impossible to breathe. The revelation was so monstrous, so diabolically evil, that my mind struggled to grasp it. It wasn't just a random scammer. It was the platform itself. The very company that promised a safe, curated space for people my age to find connection was the engine of the scam. The owner was the wife of the man who had been telling me he loved me. They were a team. They weren't just scammers. They were predators who had built their own private hunting ground. And who knew how many other women were the prey. The vengeance was no longer about one man. It was about an entire corrupt and deeply evil enterprise. Part 6. The immediate consequence of that discovery was that our small, personal investigation had just become something much, much bigger. This was not just a romance scam. It was a massive, criminal conspiracy, a case of wire fraud on a scale that was almost unimaginable. The repercussion for me was that my personal quest for justice had just become a public crusade. Liam and I sat in silence for a long time, the blinking dot on the screen a monument to their depravity. What do we do? I finally whispered. We can't go to the police. It's our word against a powerful tech CEO. No, Liam said, his voice cold and hard. You're right. We can't go to the police. We need to go bigger. My role in the next phase of the plan was the most difficult one yet. I had to continue playing the game. I had to keep Mark, or Scott, on the line. I had to make him believe I was still his loving, naive victim, that the final $10,000 was still in play. Every message I sent now felt like I was touching something venomous. My dearest Mark, I typed, my hands shaking with a mixture of revulsion and rage. The bank is still being a nightmare. But my son is helping me. He thinks he can clear it up soon. I am so sorry for the delay. I was not just bait anymore. I was a double agent, a mole in their operation. And every word I typed was a lie designed to keep them complacent while we built our weapon. Part 7. My growth in this period was in my ability to compartmentalize. I had to be two people. In my emails to Scott, I was the soft, loving, slightly flustered Eleanor he had so carefully cultivated. But in my work with Liam, I was a cold, methodical strategist. The challenge was to keep the rage, the profound sense of violation, from bleeding through. I had to overcome the trauma and turn it into a performance. My transformation was in the way I began to see my own story. It was no longer a personal failure. It was a case study. I began to research Jennifer Peterson, the wife, the CEO. I read every interview she had ever given, watched every talk she had delivered at tech conferences. She had built her entire brand on the idea of creating a safe, empowering space for older adults. She was a celebrated female entrepreneur, a champion of the silver economy. She was a hypocrite of monstrous proportions. I used my old academic skills to build a dossier, not on the scammer, but on the woman who enabled him. I found the cracks in her corporate armor, the disgruntled former employees, the rumors of shady business practices. Liam, in the meantime, was building our weapon. It was not a lawsuit, not a police report. It was a documentary. He began to structure our story, to write a treatment. He called it The Silver Fleece. It would be the story of the dark underbelly of the online dating world, with a single explosive case study at its center. The story of his own mother. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was my director, and I was his subject. I had overcome my shame by agreeing to turn it into a work of art, a piece of investigative journalism that would not only expose them, but would also serve as a warning to the entire world. Part 8. The climax was not going to be a confrontation in a park. It was going to be a public execution, broadcast in high definition. Liam, using his industry contacts, managed to get a meeting with a producer at a major, well-respected investigative news program. The kind of show that had a reputation for taking down corporate giants. We didn't go in with a pitch. We went in with a fully researched, evidence-backed, and utterly damning story. Our preparation was meticulous. We had everything. We had the emails. We had the financial records. We had the technical data from Liam's investigation, tracing the IP address from my emails directly to Jennifer Peterson's home. We had the stock photography portfolio of Klaus from Hamburg. And we had me, a credible, articulate, and deeply wronged witness. The news program, smelling the biggest story of the year, immediately agreed to produce the segment, in secret. The final piece of the trap was a single, beautiful lie. I sent one last email to Mark. It's done. I wrote. My son cleared the payment. The 10,000 is on its way. I cannot wait to finally see you. Let's start planning our future. He replied with a shower of loving, triumphant emojis. He had no idea that he was not the only one with a production schedule. His story was ending. Mine was just about to air. Part 9. The night the segment, now titled Love, Lies, and Logins, was scheduled to air, Liam and I sat together in my living room. I had not told him, but I had done one last thing. An hour before the broadcast, I had sent a simple, anonymous text message to both Scott and Jennifer Peterson. It just contained a link to the network's live stream and the words, "You should watch this." I wanted them to see it coming. The show began. The host introduced the segment with a grave, serious tone. "It is the fastest-growing crime in America," she said. "A multi-billion-dollar industry of heartbreak. Tonight, we go inside the world of romance scams." The story started with me. I saw myself on screen, my voice calm and steady, telling my story. The producers had done it beautifully, respectfully. They had turned my pain into a powerful, cautionary tale. Then the climax began. The journalist on camera laid out the evidence Liam and I had gathered. The fake photos, the electrical outlet, the hotel in Dubai, the stock photo model from Germany. It was a slow, methodical, and absolutely riveting demolition of the lie. The show then cut to a hidden camera footage. They had sent an undercover producer to the Phoenix suburb, to the house with the blinking dot. The footage showed Scott Peterson, the real Mark, getting into his car. It showed his wife, Jennifer, the CEO, leaving for work. And then came the final, devastating moment. The host looked directly into the camera. "We have discovered," she said, her voice dripping with journalistic gravitas, "that the IP address from which the fraudulent emails were sent to Eleanor Hayes originates from the home of Jennifer Peterson, the founder and CEO of the Silver Linings dating app, the very platform where so many of these scams begin." They put her corporate headshot on the screen, next to the picture of the house. "We reached out to Ms. Peterson for a comment," the host continued. She declined. In their home in Phoenix, I could only imagine the scene. The moment they saw their own house on national television. The moment their secret, profitable, and deeply evil world was laid bare for millions to see. The vengeance was not in a courtroom. It was in the quiet, undeniable glare of the television screen, a light from which they could never, ever hide. Part 10. The aftermath was a corporate and legal firestorm. The Silver Linings app, which was on the verge of a major new round of funding, imploded overnight. Its investors fled. Its users deleted their accounts in droves. The company was bankrupt within a week. Jennifer Peterson, the celebrated female entrepreneur, became a pariah, a symbol of the tech world's darkest, most cynical side. She and her husband, Scott, were arrested and faced a mountain of federal wire fraud charges. My life was changed forever, but not in the way they had intended. The broadcast turned me into an accidental celebrity, a reluctant hero for a generation of women who had been silenced by shame. I was no longer a victim. I was an advocate. The emotional resolution was in the thousands of emails and letters I received, from women all over the world, who saw my story and finally found the courage to tell their own. I had lost my money, but I had started a revolution. A year later, I stood before a congressional subcommittee in Washington, D.C., testifying in support of a new bill aimed at protecting seniors from online fraud. The Eleanor Act, they were calling it. I told my story again, not as a victim, but as an expert witness. I looked out at the faces of the powerful men and women on the committee, and I felt not fear, but a profound, quiet strength. My voice, the voice they had tried to silence, was now helping to write the law. The details matter. A single, out-of-place fact can be the thread that unravels a universe of lies. This story is a powerful reminder to trust that small voice of doubt, to look closer, and to never be afraid to ask for help. These predators thrive on our silence. Our stories, shared, are their greatest fear. What is one red flag you have learned to look for in the digital world? Share your wisdom in the comments below, and help us create a stronger, more vigilant community. If this story of a woman who turned her analytical eye into a weapon for justice inspired you, please like and subscribe.